Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. He touched my back lightly, just between my shoulder blades. It wasn't a grab, not even a real caress, just enough contact to make me freeze. Not because it was wrong, but because it was unexpected. That soft touch sent a wave through me, subtle and loaded. And before I could even process what it meant, my stepson, who had been silently standing at the kitchen counter, asked, "Is this okay?" That question, so simple and raw, cut through the air like a blade. Let me explain how we got here. It had been 2 years since I married Evan, my second husband. And like most things in adult life, it came with history. He had a son from a previous marriage, Caleb, now 23, finishing college and back home for a few months while job hunting. We all lived under one roof, in a calm, shared rhythm that worked well enough. No drama, no awkwardness. We were just adults managing life together. Until recently, something started to shift. I noticed how Caleb looked at me not with discomfort or confusion, but with a kind of quiet attentiveness that hadn't been there before. And I couldn't lie to myself. I noticed him too. The way his eyes lingered a second too long. How he stayed in the room just a little after everyone else left. How he listened not in the way kids tolerate adults, but like a man watching someone he wants to understand. Still, I kept everything polite. Distant enough. Nothing ever crossed a line. Then came last Thursday night. Evan had gone on a short business trip, just overnight. Caleb and I stayed in. I made dinner. We laughed about something dumb on TV. It was comfortable. Light. Easy. I wore a loose sweater, barefoot in the kitchen, rinsing dishes when he came up behind me to grab a towel from the drawer. That's when his hand brushed my back. That's all it was. But it stopped me cold. The moment stretched him behind me, hand hovering, not touching again, but clearly there. I turned slightly, my breath caught, and that's when he asked, "Is this okay?" He wasn't smirking. He wasn't being slick. He looked nervous, curious, almost like he needed to know the answer for more than just that moment. And I didn't know what to say. Was it okay? That's where the story really begins, not with a touch, but with a question. Because asking, "Is this okay?" isn't just about a boundary. It's about permission, about fear, about possibility, about the lines between what's proper and what's real. This is not a story about forbidden love or scandal. It's about what happens when two people, both adults, both technically family, but not by blood, start to feel something they didn't expect. Something tender. Something real. Something that could either destroy the balance they've kept or open a door neither of them thought about unlocking. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I'll take you back to that night, to the silence after his question, and the moment I finally turned around. What I said next changed everything. I turned around slowly, heart in my throat. Caleb was standing just a few inches behind me, eyes searching mine, like he was waiting for permission to breathe. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. His question was still hanging in the air like steam off the sink. "Is this okay?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw someone not trying to cross a line, but trying to understand where it was. "I don't know," I said quietly. That was the truth. Nothing had happened, but something had changed. I could feel it between us. And judging by the way he looked at me, I wasn't imagining it. We both stepped back at the same time, like we'd agreed silently that it was too much, too soon. I busied myself wiping down the counter, heart still racing, while he grabbed a glass of water and walked to the living room like nothing had happened. But everything had. The next morning was quiet. He was up early, already dressed, sitting on the back patio with his laptop open, but clearly not working. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. We didn't talk about the night before, and I didn't push it. But the silence had changed. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like it was holding something neither of us could name yet. The truth is, I'd been thinking about him more than I wanted to admit. At first, I chalked it up to him being around more. You start noticing things when people share a space, how they move, how they laugh, the way they carry themselves when they don't think anyone's watching. And Caleb, for all his quietness, had a presence. There was a calm to him, but underneath, there was something else, some kind of tension he kept buried. I remembered when he first moved in. Evan had asked me if I was okay with it, said it would be temporary. Caleb had just ended a long-term relationship and needed some space to figure things out. He was polite, respectful, and careful around me. At first. Over time, that caution turned into comfort. Now it felt like we were circling something unspoken. I wasn't naive. I knew how this might look from the outside. A woman, married, living with her stepson. But there was no plan, no game. It just happened slowly, through glances that lasted too long and conversations that dug a little deeper. He never flirted, not in the obvious way. But there were moments, quiet ones, that spoke louder than words. Like last week, when I was reading on the couch and he sat beside me, closer than usual. We didn't touch, but his knee barely grazed mine. Neither of us moved. We just stayed like that, pretending it meant nothing. But last night had made it real. That light touch, that question, "Is this okay?" wasn't just about his hand on my back. It was about everything we hadn't said. And the scariest part? I didn't want to pull away. I should have. I know I should have. But I didn't. And that changes everything. That weekend, Evan came back. The rhythm of the house shifted again, his voice louder, his presence filling up space that had felt softer in his absence. I noticed how Caleb withdrew a little, stayed in his room more, answered questions with short nods or simple yes. Evan didn't seem to notice. He was tired from the trip, distracted with emails, already planning the next one. I watched him move around the kitchen, pouring coffee, talking about office drama, completely unaware of the pause hanging between me and his son. Saturday night, Evan suggested a movie, but Caleb passed and said he had work to finish. I could feel his eyes on me as he left the room. I didn't look back. Later that night, I found myself alone on the couch again, scrolling on my phone, trying to keep my mind busy. Evan had fallen asleep early. I wasn't expecting anything, wasn't planning anything, but around midnight, I heard Caleb coming downstairs. He didn't say a word, just walked into the kitchen for water. I stayed where I was, but I could feel it, him lingering there. Like he wanted me to notice. I finally stood up, just to break the tension. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He shook his head, leaning against the counter. Too much noise in my head. I knew exactly what he meant. The silence stretched again, full of questions neither of us could ask. And that's when something new hit me, not just guilt or curiosity, but this heavy realization. If Evan ever noticed, even just a glance too long, it would break everything. Not just my marriage. It would fracture something bigger, trust, family, whatever normalcy we were pretending to have. But that wasn't the only weight I was carrying. There was something else I hadn't told Caleb or Evan. My sister had called earlier that week, asking if her teenage daughter could come stay with us for the summer. She wanted her to be around adults who were stable and could offer structure while she figured out her own mess back home. I said yes without thinking, but now I wasn't sure that was smart. How could I offer structure to anyone when I couldn't even sort out what I was feeling? And what exactly was I feeling? There was no label for it. No neat explanation. I wasn't in love with Caleb, but I wasn't indifferent either. There was a connection, a pull, and it wasn't one-sided. He felt it too. It wasn't about age or rebellion or boredom, it felt deeper than that, which only made it harder to ignore. "I've been thinking," Caleb said suddenly, snapping me back. "I should move out. Just find something short-term." That hit harder than I expected. I didn't know what to say. Part of me agreed. It was the smart move, the safe one. But another part of me, one I wasn't proud of, wanted him to stay. Wanted to see where this strange path might lead, even if it was dangerous. I didn't answer him right away, because the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, going over what Caleb had said. I should move out. It made sense. It was the adult thing to do. But something in the way he said it felt more like a warning than a decision, like he was trying to protect me from something we both knew was coming. The next morning, the air in the house felt different. Evan was back in his usual rhythm, coffee, gym, checking his laptop at the table like it was another limb. He kissed my cheek as he passed, but didn't really look at me. I smiled back, but it felt thin. My mind was elsewhere. Caleb hadn't come downstairs yet, and I could feel the weight of his presence, even behind the closed door. By afternoon, Evan left to run errands, and I found myself in the kitchen again. It was always the kitchen where these moments happened, maybe because it was the only place in the house where things didn't feel staged. I stood at the sink, staring out the window, when I heard the floor creak behind me. I didn't turn around. "I haven't told my dad yet," Caleb said, voice low. I knew what he meant without asking. That he hadn't told Evan he planned to leave. That there was still a window where things might stay the same, or go completely off course. "You should," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I will," he replied. "But not yet." I finally turned to face him. He was standing a little closer than he should have been, arms folded, like he was holding himself back. There was something stormy in his eyes, frustration, maybe, or just confusion. Whatever it was, it matched what I felt inside. He stepped forward slightly. "This isn't just me, right?" I could have lied. I could have told him it was nothing, that he misread everything. But I didn't, because I knew he hadn't. "It's not just you," I said, and instantly regretted saying it out loud. The room went still. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the fridge. Everything else, every breath, every heartbeat, seemed to be holding its breath. "I don't want to mess anything up," he said. "But I don't think I can stay here pretending none of this is real." His voice cracked a little at the end, and it shattered something in me. All this time, I thought I was the only one wrestling with it. But he was too. He was just better at hiding it. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said. "You won't," he replied. "Unless we keep lying." That's when we heard the front door open. Evan was home. Caleb stepped back. Fast. The look in his eyes disappeared behind the same neutral mask he always wore around his dad. And I turned back to the sink, pretending to rinse something that wasn't even dirty. The silence between us said everything we couldn't. And now it was only a matter of time. Evan walked in with 2 grocery bags and a bright mood, completely unaware of the quiet storm he'd just interrupted. Caleb had already stepped to the side and slipped into a casual tone, asking if he needed help. I didn't turn around right away. My hands were still under the faucet, cold water running, even though I wasn't washing anything. I needed a second to push it all back down, the feelings, the tension, everything that had just surfaced. As the guys unpacked food, I forced myself to smile and asked about his errands. Evan talked about running into an old friend, someone from college, and I nodded at the right parts, but my mind wasn't on the conversation. I kept glancing at Caleb when Evan wasn't looking. He avoided my eyes now, his focus locked on a carton of eggs like they held all the answers. Later that evening, we were all at the table, eating takeout because no one had the energy to cook. It should have felt normal, but everything felt too still. That's when Evan dropped something unexpected. "Oh, almost forgot. Your mom called today," he said to Caleb. "She wants to stop by next week. Said she's finally coming into town." I froze. Caleb did too. His mom. We never talked about her. She and Evan had divorced years ago, and she'd never made an effort to visit. Now she suddenly wanted to show up? Caleb forced a shrug. "That's random." Evan smiled. "Well, she says she wants to reconnect. Maybe she's finally grown up." The moment passed, but something shifted in Caleb's expression. Something uneasy. After dinner, Caleb stayed behind to clean up while Evan went upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door click shut. "What was that about?" I asked. He wiped his hands on a towel, not looking at me. She never calls. She never wants to see me. Something's off. I leaned against the counter. Do you think she knows something? He finally looked at me, his jaw tight. I don't know. But if she's showing up now after all these years, it's not just coincidence. A new tension started to grow, and it was colder. Realer. Like we weren't just dealing with feelings anymore, but consequences we hadn't thought about. If Caleb's mom got involved, if she started asking questions, digging into things, we could lose the illusion of control we'd been barely holding on to. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. And the next morning, it got worse. There was a message on my phone, no caller ID. Just a voice I didn't recognize. A woman. You don't know me, but I know what's happening in your house. You need to stop it before someone gets hurt. That was all she said before the line went dead. I just stared at the screen. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about feelings or attraction anymore. Someone else knew. And that changed everything. I stared at my phone, the anonymous voice replaying in my mind. You don't know me, but I know what's happening in your house. The message wasn't just a warning. It felt personal, like someone had been watching, listening, waiting for the right moment to strike. I told Caleb that night. We sat in silence at the kitchen table, lights low, the sound of the fridge the only thing filling the space. He was pale, quiet for too long. Then he looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before: fear. I think I know who it is, he finally said. His voice was low, like someone might hear us. My ex, he continued. The one I told you about when I first moved in. It ended badly. She said she'd ruin my life if I ever ghosted her again. I did. She's the only one who could have guessed what's happening here, or made it sound worse than it is. I tried to stay calm, but the pressure in my chest was building. Do you think she's been here? Watching? He nodded slowly. She knows where we live. She's the reason I came here in the first place. I didn't want her around me anymore. Before I could respond, we heard a knock at the front door. 3 short taps, then silence. We both froze. It was almost midnight. I moved toward the door, heart racing, and Caleb stepped in front of me. Let me do it, he said. He opened it. Standing there was a woman in a black hoodie, arms crossed, phone in hand. She didn't look dangerous, but she looked determined. You must be her, she said, eyes on me. Funny. You don't look like someone who'd steal their stepson's attention. Caleb stepped forward. You need to leave. She laughed once. You think I'm scared of you? I've got screenshots. Messages. Pictures from the window. You're not as quiet as you think. I felt sick. She wasn't bluffing. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said. But I will if you don't end this. Tonight. She turned and walked off into the night, disappearing down the sidewalk like a shadow. The silence after she left was worse than the knock. I sat down on the stairs, hands shaking. Caleb sat beside me. I'll leave, he said quietly. Tomorrow. You don't deserve this. And just like that, it felt like everything that had built up between us was collapsing. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was too real. Too risky. The next day, Caleb packed a bag. Evan didn't question it, Caleb just said he needed space. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. But the twist? 2 days later, Evan handed me a letter that had come in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of me and Caleb at the kitchen sink, his hand on my back. The same moment he asked, "Is this okay?" And written across it, in red ink, "He may be gone, but I'm still watching." I sat on the edge of the bed, that photo still in my hands. The red ink had smudged slightly from my grip, but the words stayed burned into my mind. He may be gone, but I'm still watching. I didn't know what she wanted anymore. Revenge? Control? Or just chaos for the sake of it? Either way, she had it. The message was clear. We were never really alone. I didn't call Caleb. I knew he'd gone off the grid on purpose, probably to protect both of us. Evan still had no idea, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. Not out of guilt, but survival. What happened between me and Caleb, whatever it was, had ended the moment that photo showed up. Not because it wasn't real, but because we couldn't let it live in a world where people were watching, judging, ready to weaponize it. Life slowly slipped back into routine. Evan made plans for a vacation in the fall. My niece arrived for the summer and brought a different kind of energy into the house. It helped her presence, her lightness. I poured myself into caring for her, into giving her the stability her mother hoped we could. But some nights, when the house was quiet and the sky just a little too still, I'd think of Caleb. I'd wonder where he went, if he was safe, if he thought of me. A few weeks later, a small box showed up at the front door. No return address again. Inside was a note in Caleb's handwriting. I'm okay. Don't worry. Some things aren't meant to happen, even if we felt them. Thank you for being the only one who ever saw me clearly. Be safe. That was all. No contact info. No hint of where he was. I folded the letter, tucked it into a book I knew no one else would ever open, and let the story close with it. Sometimes, the people who come into our lives do so for a reason we don't understand until much later. Caleb came into mine and woke something up in me. Not chaos. Not confusion. But honesty. The kind of honesty that forces you to look at who you really are and what lines you're willing to blur. We never crossed the final line, but maybe the emotional one was even more complicated. This wasn't a story about scandal. It was about restraint. Choices. Timing. And how sometimes love doesn't look like it does in movies. Sometimes it looks like walking away to protect what matters most. If you've ever felt pulled between logic and something deeper, something unexplainable, you're not alone. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Would you have told Evan? Would you want to see where it could have gone? Or did things end the way they were supposed to?